Hello and welcome to Stratfest Meet the Festival for the Rez Sisters. My name's Stephanie Johns and I'm Education Associate here at the Stratford Festival, and I'm honored to be joined by Jani Lauzon and Brefny Caribou this morning in discussing the Rez Sisters, theatre, and their careers. As always, during Meet the Festival events, we love to hear from you at home and answer the burning questions you have on your mind. So please be sure to add your questions to the chat, and I will do my best to relay them to our guests. But of course, before we begin in earnest, I want to take some time to recognize the land. I'm currently in my home in Stratford on the original territory of the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaronk or Neutrals, and the Mississaugas. And I'm grateful every day to the caretakers of this land, and I do encourage you at home to do some research on the land that you reside on and consider the impact that you have on the land and the peoples who have come before you and those who will come after us. So I will now go into my introductions of the lovely ladies who are here with me this morning. So Jani Lauzon plays Pelagia Patchnose in the Rez Sisters. This is Jani's third season at the Stratford Festival. During her past seasons at the festival, she has also played Humatuk and Panic and Marianne in The Breathing Hole. And then elsewhere, she has so many credits. Elsewhere, she's played Trebonius and Cato in Julius Caesar for Groundling and Crows, Cordelia and the Fool in King Lear at the NAC, Elder in Apocalypsis for Luminato, Neighbor and Servant in Blood Wedding for Modern Times and Aluna Theatre, Shylock in The Merchant of Venice for Shakespeare in the Rough. Her film and TV appearances include Saving Hope, Hard Rock Medical, Destiny Ridge, Conspiracy of Silence. Jani's work as a puppeteer, which I was very excited to read about this because I'm like, I watched these shows, include Granny on Mr. Dress Up and Pa Foley on Big Comfy Couch, and Sika on Wampa's World. Her awards include a Gemini Award for Wampa's World, Best Actress for Doris in Wendigo Tale at the American Indian Film Festival and Dream Speakers Film Festival, and an ACTRA Toronto Award of Excellence. You can find Jani online via her website, janilauzon.com, or at papercanoeprojects.com, or on Instagram. Her company, Paper Canoe Projects, produces her original work, including A Side of Dreams, I Call Myself Princess, and Prophecy Fog. Jani is also the Associate Director of English Acting at the National Theatre School, so she's got lots of time on her hands, clearly. And then we have the lovely Brefny Caribou here, and she plays Jabunigan Peterson in the Rez Sisters this year. This is her second season at the Stratford Festival. Brefny is a Cree and Irish settler, performer, and creator from Toronto. She holds an MFA in acting from York University. With curiosity, patience, and lots of humor, Brefny focuses her attention on works surrounding identity and decolonization, striving to evolve her artistic practice on the regular. She has had the privilege of working across the country with many notable companies and collectives, including Theatre Kingston, Urban Link, and Caravan Farm Theatre. Brefny is also co-creator of the Solitudes of Aluna Theatre of the Solitudes for Aluna Theatre and Nightwood Theatre, a collective creation piece centered around the histories of 8 ensemble members, inspired by the world of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And it had its world premiere in January 2020 in the before times. And most recently, Brefny participated in Aluna Theatre's Winter Artist Residency, and she is currently a part of Native Earth Performing Arts. Oh, and I forgot to ask about this, Anamikig Creators Unit.
Anamikig.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for joining me today for Meet the Festival.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah. So it's great to have both of you here. So my first question is, can you articulate how it feels to be back performing on a stage after such a long hiatus?
Right for the jugular. You want to start?
It's a big question. It's a big question.
You want to start, Brefny?
Sure, I can start. It's a real trip. And I have found myself in moments realizing how easy it is to just slip back into, oh yeah, I'm just back at work. And I'm just, going to do the show, getting all ready. And then I realize, whoa, it's been so long. and to see people's faces to act on stage. Like I remember the first time that we were all able to see each other unmasked on the deck, and that was such a wild feeling. It was really it's exciting. It's really cool, and being able to see some of the shows at the festival, being on the audience side as well. I got to see Midsummer Night's Dream before it closed, and that was emotional as well because I was like, oh, this is my first theater in 18 years, months. and so yeah, it's noticing, trying to appreciate the moments of like, okay, wow, this is special and to be savored, and not just be like, all right, okay, back to work, because I'm excited and I'm happy to be back at work, you know?
Mm-hmm. Jani?
Yeah, I was lucky in that with my work at NTS, I was engaged in artistic practice throughout the year. We were, for the most part, in the studio and producing theater. So I was able to experience being an audience member even throughout the year with very strict COVID protocols, sometimes audiences of 4 or 5, but nonetheless engaged in that process from that side of things. But I really struggled coming back as an actor because I felt an insecurity. I felt a slowness. That first week back was it was interesting to re-engage with that muscle and that intuition and those impulses that used to come so quickly. So it took me a good week and a half, 2 weeks to reconnect with that side of myself, and I'm glad that I found it again because I was a little worried, but it came back in full force. So excited about that, and in a way even deeper. I think I have
Right.
much more appreciation for my process now, knowing that it had been away from me for a while.
Right. And going how Brefny, you just had that 18 years, I mean months, but for theater people like us, like it feels like years that we just lost in the place that we love so much. And as an audience member, getting to see the Rez Sisters, like I was just super emotional, and I'm like, oh, this is so special, and just like I needed it so much to see your show. In my heart, especially after this long time not getting to see theater, and to be in a space with other Indigenous people. Like it was just the best. Anyway, but I agree, it felt so long to be away, and then to get back into the audience kind of or audience place, and be like, okay, can I make sounds? How do I react? And it's getting back into that for an audience member too, getting back into the rules of theater. So for either of you, has there been a learning curve in terms of being on an outdoor thrust in addition to combating outdoor noise and weather issues, and then also getting to sit just off the stage while the action's kind of going on? How has your experience been in that way?
I can jump in on that. Actually, for me, it's kind of full circle. So a lot of my original training was in street theater. I studied a lot of mime and mask and clown, and I spent a good first 5 years of my career actually traveling across Canada doing street theater. And it's a very specific kind of relationship to audience, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. And working outside, I've done a lot of outside, mainly Shakespeare, but I've done a lot of outdoor work, and it does require a different acting muscle for sure, because you're always in engagement and relationship with your environment in a much different way than you are in an indoor theater where it's a controlled environment. So I love it. I think it's fantastic.
That's awesome.
It's not for everyone, but for me it's just amazing. Yeah.
Cool. Brefny?
Yeah. I never thought I would do outdoor summertime theater, because um, I have like massive anxiety around thunderstorms. And so I just kind of had written off that I was like, it's just something I'll never do. I won't apply for it and it'll never happen. Haha. And so that coming here, realizing it was going to happen, realizing everything was coming together the way it was, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. All right, it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. And so far, so good. The elements I found so beautiful to like be doing a scene and like interact with a breeze, like a brush of wind comes past you, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, a new moment happens. And even the other night I was watching from the sides, I look up and I see the top of a tree, and I think it was during the Bingo Betty monologue. And all of a sudden there's just these crows. I saw one little crow sat at the top of a tree, and then another, and then another, and then another. And I was just watching them watch the show, and I was like, this whole other little audience was gathered. And so those things have just took me by surprise. And I just find, so yeah, as Jenny said, just so beautiful. And I'm really happy that that my fear didn't rule my judgments, and that it's gone so well. And like, we've got a week left, but touch wood, the storms have just skirted past our performances, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great to hear that. Yeah, you were able to go get through that, and realize and see that for yourself, and have that challenge. I was going to say also that the elements or the sounds or whatever could be an extra character, almost just like a soundscape can end up being a character and make you talk about the breeze, or like even the sound of an animal or a sound of a person, like it can bring so much more. So yeah, I really love that. Oh, that's so wonderful. Can you share maybe when you knew in your life you wanted to perform? Was there a specific person or a play or a portrayal that you're like, yep, I have to do that? Was there a moment in time that you knew you had to be a performer?
I saw The Wizard of Oz when I was 3. And when I figured out that it wasn't real, that it was like a show,
Yeah.
I was like, you can do that? That's what I'll do. I want to be like the Scarecrow. I want to flop around and have a good time. That was the moment where I was like, that's my first moment where I was like, oh, that's an option? I can do that? Okay, I want to do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think for me, I was born to be an artist. So my personal opinion is that we're all artists, and especially if we look at Indigenous cultures and Indigenous cultures from around the world, in many ways, when we look back, there wasn't really a separation between artistic practice and just simply being a human being. The way that we lived our life, and because our relationship to survival was so immediate, every day was an artistic adventure, because you were in search of food, and you were in search of, like, there was a heightened reality that we all lived in, which I think is very, very creative and connected in a different kind of way. And things like the Industrial Revolution and residential school, et cetera, separated that idea of artist from practice, and from artistic practice from just simply being living.
Right.
So that's my personal opinion, but I do feel that for me, early on, like just so early, I just recognized that I looked at the world through an artist's eyes. And both my biological parents and my foster family were all very, very creative people involved in theater or music or art or artistic practice in some kind of way. So I was also surrounded by it growing up, and I feel honored and lucky to have had that experience.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. We have a question from the audience. So, hello, Pat. Thank you for sending in your question. Can you speak to the development of this particular production of the Rez Sisters, if you have that kind of information? And was the cast collaboratively involved?
You want me to jump in, Bref?
Sure, yeah.
Jessica Carmichael as our director is a unique director and had a vision for this play, unlike any other director or any other production of the Rez Sisters that I've either been in or I've seen. And I've seen a number of them, and I've also been in a number of them. So when Jess came with the vision, and also because in her studies, as she has a master's in directing, um, her practice involves gestural language and or dance practice in the creation of imagery and the way that she supports the story through adding a layer of gestural language to the piece. So in part, our offers as collaborators was to really trust her vision and to explore and make offers within the container of the vision that she created. So yes, definitely, we were all a part of the creation of the gestural language that was part of the container that she brought forward as, I think, an incredible vision. You want to add anything, Bref? I'm sure I've
Yeah.
missed things.
No, that's a great way to put it. What I will add is uh, what delighted and surprised me about working with Jess, and I'm working on this production, was even before we were all together in Stratford, um, that we were able to communicate about who my character was, who my version of Jabunigan Peterson was, and have that space. And even in the rehearsal hall, doing little research presentations about a certain aspect of our characters, just from the us as performers' perspective. Like, okay, what's one thing that relates to this character's experience within the play, or something that's tangentially related. And that was so informative to hear from other people, and so fun to do, because it really lets everyone else in on what the inner workings are, which isn't always, at least in my experience, hasn't always been shared so explicitly. So it's, you get a little bit more of like I got a little bit more of a detailed um, vision of what each person was doing and their version of this particular character, which I loved.
Oh, that is really cool because I feel like typically it's a very personal project figuring out what your character is or who they are and their background. It's like, yep, this is what I've decided, but if you get to share that, that would just make everything just so much more community driven and collective, which is just so beautiful. Um, Kind of going off of that, can you describe what the rehearsal process was like? Was a lot of it online before you arrived, or how did that work?
It was, well, speaking of the of thunder, there were a few like days in rehearsal where we would have to come back online because of the weather, because we were rehearsing outside.
Mm.
And circling back to something we kind of talked about earlier, that first week outside, rehearsing something outside, but with many protocols in place, with distance and with mask, um, I realized how strongly I rely on facial cues for
Mm.
comprehension, for validation, for expression, to know whether you like me or not, that kind of stuff. And so to have this, to experience the first bit of rehearsal outside like that, with a new environment, with new people, was incredibly challenging for me. And yeah. that's just something that I thought of in relationship to what we were talking about earlier, but also in terms of like the process, a little bit online, a lot outside, masks. Those barriers were I was not expecting, and they were definitely super challenging.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jani?
No, I think Brefny covered that one for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
cool.
totally in support of whatever she said. Yeah.
I feel like even in everyday life, I'm just like, did that person, like, I know that person, did they recognize? All right, well, I'll talk to them
Yeah.
another time. Like, you don't know with those masks sometimes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right, we have another audience question. Hello, Bill. Do you have any familiarity with the Anishinaabeg version of the play? What are the differences between the two versions, if you know?
I will say no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't speak my languages, and but I do know that the process of creating the translation was very thorough and involved language speakers, language keepers, and I would imagine that because the translations must have been pretty hard. It's our languages are very descriptive, not like English at all. So, something that you say in English, which is 5 words, is like a paragraph in Indigenous languages. So yeah, but super exciting that that happened, and I hope that there's more of a trend for that moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So this kind of goes off something we started talking about earlier, but how does the audience interaction, especially being outside, being able to see everybody's eyeballs at least, and being able to make eye contact with them rather than just like the first 2 rows of a dark theater, how does that come into play for you while you are on stage? I mean, for me, watching where we're all supposed to get out our paper and crows and stuff like that kind of, there's interaction there, but what about maybe not that scene or that scene, whatever you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's an interesting part of an artistic process, and I think every actor is different. So for me, I tell a story. I'm telling the story as an actor. I'm aware that I'm telling that story. But I'm also very much just inside the story. I need to be inside the story. And so I'm in those moments. I'm feeling those moments and I'm expressing them out into the space. And so, um, for the most part, the audience for me just becomes a part of my bigger world and this
Mm.
world that I reach out to, at this wide, beautiful, amazing world that I reach out to. When I'm specifically required to look at the audience, I actually really enjoy those moments because I actually try to find people that I can just really like look right in the eye,
Mm-hmm.
which I find, and that comes also I think from my street performance where
Mm.
that relationship is like I can do that. I can just look at you. Let's have a nonverbal conversation in the moment. So I enjoy those moments. But for me, I always have to be, I'm
Mm.
in the story and I'm sharing that. It's all a part of me sharing that story.
What about you, Brefny?
Yeah, it's I felt a part of this coming back into space and working on this story, and just at this particular moment in time, um, I was feeling really raw. So when the prospect of like, oh, we are going to have an audience and the show's going to happen and everything's um, and I'm gonna share the work that I've been doing with this character that was very emotional and raw. It was really interesting to. It was like relearning how to trust an audience to hold the story that I'm sharing and to hold me in a specific moment because of time, because of space. I was like, oh, that was really scary at first. And so when we had our first audiences and leading up to that, it's like, oh, for me, in the moment where I have a, you know, a big monologue, sharing that with the audience and like involving them and like looking out to them um, as part of that moment became super important to me. Um, as a reminder, because it is something that is so deep and I was feeling so raw about it, actually being able to like look into the audience's, you know, eyes at least, I found super important for me and very helpful, so that so that just became a part of my whole track. And it is, you know, and it is for everyone at the very beginning and the pre-show, and I can look into the crowd. I'm looking at people taking their seats, leading up to that moment where where my character shares something really traumatic. So that by the end, when now I'm looking out to the audience again, but there's joy, but there's fun, but there's excitement. Having that journey was it was totally unexpected, and I love looking at them at the end and encouraging people to like take things out, because I'm like, no, we're sharing this. Like, we're at the bingo. And any moment where like someone like goes like, woo, and like plays along, it's just like, yeah.
Yeah. I like when audience participation, just like when that moment happens, it's just so beautiful also for the audience members to be like, oh, we're here too. We're part of this. We're a team. Like, it's just so exciting. I absolutely agree. We have a question from Louise, and hello, Louise. You're one of our top fans for Meet the Festival, I would say. So, how did the production this year change from what was planned for the 2020 season, if you know, before the COVID shutdown?
Wow, I would say that Jess's vision has always remained the same, but we were originally supposed to be in the studio last year, and so the adaptation that we all needed to embrace was just moving to the Tom Patterson stage design, and also then being outside. But Jess has done such an amazing job in remaining true to her vision of the piece, and so the environment around how the story is being told was really the main change, I think.
And do we know, was it going to be a short, like a 90-minute version in the studio, or was it going to be a bit longer?
I believe it was always going to, I wish Jess were here to confirm,
Yeah.
but I believe it was always going to be a 90-minute version. I think that because we were, yeah, that's my understanding, was that it was still going to be 90 minutes, a simpler staging, minimal set. Those, I believe, were always was always the artistic vision of the piece. Yeah.
Cool. Brefny, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I don't think I know too much about what the transition from what was meant to be in 2020 to now. So in many ways, I feel like lucky, because in my mind, I'm like, this was always the show, you know? So to see it, I'm just like, yeah, this is the show. It was always supposed to be rainwater on the floor and breezes and lawnmowers. Like that was always the show.
Yeah, it was always the intended way. Amazing. This is kind of more of a fun question. What is your favorite piece to watch and see performed? And then what is your favorite piece to perform? If you have any. Either way. If you
Wow.
can narrow it down.
Oh boy. Well, I'm I'm a bit of a Shakespeare geek. I there's something uh, and I teach a lot of Shakespeare uh, to Indigenous students, and so I've for many years I've been seeking an intersection with the work that uh, that has an Indigenous worldview intact. And this is totally off topic, but I just read another book about Shakespeare's wife Agnes, and I'm like, oh, that, like, some of his work makes so much sense when you learn about her. I
Oh.
don't know. It's my personal opinion. Anyway, so I've never had the opportunity to play King Lear, but I would love to do that it's on my bucket list. But and I've really had some great opportunities to play a lot of men's roles in the Shakespeare canon, so I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to do that. Um, I have a crazy piece of my own called Prophecy Fog, which is my most recent solo piece, and it's the hardest, most vulnerable thing I have ever done as an actor, and it scared the crap out of me, and it's unlike anything I've ever done, and as an actor, and I and it's outside of like a play idea, but I'm very, very excited about getting that on tour. So that is my hope for the future. And then in terms of, I am just a theater nut. Like I'll go see anything, and there's always something about a play that doesn't even quite work for me that I can find that I love about it. So I I'm a particular fan of theater for young audience, though. I think the magic in that kind of storytelling and the simplicity and the structure and the dramaturgy of TYA shows is hard. It's really hard to write a
Mhm.
really great TYA show, and I'm a big fan of that kind of work. So, yes, I've rambled. Over to you, Brefny.
A
Well,
beautiful
amazing.
ramble, even if it was a ramble.
Yeah, it's well, I was going to say that I mean, I've seen Prophecy Fog, and I loved it. And some of my favorite kinds of shows to see are solo pieces
Mm,
because it's so like it's like when I'm in the audience, I can feel the lifting of energy and all of the work that goes into holding a space as a single performer,
Mm.
and it just blows my mind every time. The movements, and I've seen all different kinds of solo shows, but just to watch someone work that hard and make it look so effortless and like take a whole room with them on a journey is just like it blows my mind every single time. Like it's a special kind of experience, and I just love I love witnessing it. Um, and in terms of what I like to, what roles I enjoy or what pieces I enjoy, and I guess this is a little more broad, but on kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, I love being in ensemble. I am also a huge fan of puppetry, and I love puppeteering, and I love puppeteering something with more than one person because it's just such a motion, and to be on the inside, to know that I'm like one part of like a larger image that has that magic, that has that um bringing something to life, animating something and giving that focus is just so much fun. And yeah, some of my favorite moments in our show in Rez Sisters are the ones where we're all, you know, when we're moving something together, when
Mm.
we're all kind of participating in in the action, whether it's one person has the focus and we're kind of moving around them. I love to be inside of it because it just feels oh, I don't know, I just feel really lucky to be uh giving focus and like breathing on stage and not necessarily the center of attention. Like every once in a while when I can just be like this is to take like one nice breath on stage, many breaths hopefully, but you know those few where you're just like I can really like sink this one in because I'm a part of something, and I'm not necessarily the one that is speaking or has the center of focus. um and I would also love to play Lear. I
Mm.
did a small like little workshop when I was in grad school, and I did get to play Lear, and it was really scary and really hard. And we only got like a hand, gosh, we only performed it maybe even once. I think it was just once. We built up to one performance. There was a thing at York called the Shakespeare Projects, which were a lot of fun. Just these like small hour-long versions of Shakespeare pieces, and all the BFAs and the MFAs were directing and are in them, and you get 10 days to put it all together. And it was just like, it was lots of fun. But in that one, I got to play Lear, and it was a marathon. We only did the first act, and I was like, whew. Every time I would get to the end of a speech or like get to end of something, I'd be like, I did it. So yeah, I think that would be a monumental challenge and also a lot of fun.
Very cool. Oh no, what was I going to say? Oh, I was just going to say that I just want to play like the porter. I just want to get to be silly and and
Yeah.
drunk and
Yeah.
just be the kind of like the comic relief in those moments
Yeah.
where people can just like, huh. But also relating to Rez Sisters and how you're talking about moving as one and everything, it was such a cool moment to watch when you're going to the bingo and the like, oh, these moments are happening while we're still traveling, and oh, this
Mhm.
moment is happening, and that was just such a beautiful. I keep going around. I think like a circle is just how I like visualize it in my head, but it was such a cool visual, and I could look at the person who's in focus, but I could also peek over and watch the movement of the car too, right? Like it was just, oh, I loved it. We have another question from our biggest fan, Louise. Can you speak to the meaning or symbolism of the plastic sheet?
Yeah. Do you want me to try to start that one, Bref, and then
Sure, yes,
jump
please.
in? So, one of the things that Jess really looked at in terms of, oftentimes this play is done from the more of the perspective of the farcical elements of it, really focusing on the comedy, and which is great. And there's been some really amazing productions done. But what Jess was looking at was what's underneath that. What is underneath the need for comedy? We often talk about. The use of humor in our communities because it's a survival technique in a way. It's the only way that we can look at all of and make it through in certain circumstances the horrific genocidal experience that our ancestors and um, and relatives have gone through and that we continue to experience. And so what Jess wanted to do was to really dig deeper and look at what was underneath that. And part of what was underneath that is loss, grief, and death. And focusing on the death of Maria Dell allows us, as an ensemble, to investigate what happens when one of your community and one of your family members leaves, and how do you deal with that grief? Part of that then is the idea of a hospital environment where everything is sterile, where everything is plastic, where everything is that environment of plastic gloves, of masks, of things that live in that world that we were dealing with, and that Maria Dell was dealing with. But also the other layer of that, and that is the death of our world and our earth, and how plastic in itself uh, is killing our birds, is taking over our and sucking the oxygen out of our water supplies, our oceans. And so it was a beautiful metaphor for how we are really literally potentially um, killing our planet. And there's no going back from that for sure. The other practical level is just on top of Pelagia's roof. When you're fixing a roof, oftentimes you have plastic, especially when it takes you 5 months to get your roof done. You have to put plastic over it to make sure that it doesn't drip into your house. So on many levels, the plastic has a number of symbols and metaphors that are wrapped and rolled into it. Yeah. And how it and we get stuck in it, and we get consumed by it, we get wrapped in it, and seagulls and birds and crows and all of those birds, those lovely amazing birds that are ingesting this plastic that we are throwing out into our beautiful, or as the elders talk about, the skin of Mother Earth is being covered with plastic and suffocating the earth. Happy. It's
it's a happy image. Yeah.
It's a happy image, but a beautiful, complex one that just envisioned for a foundation of the piece.
Mm-hmm. And also like a literal foundation where that you walk on all the time too. So I think it's it's intense. Do you have anything you want to add, Brefny, or do you want me to move on?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is in the way that I interact with the plastic, which is a lot throughout the show. For me, it always represented like what is always there but not always addressed. Like it's constantly it's right there. It's at the surface. Like if it's on the roof, it's on the roof, and you're walking on it, and then it gets bunched up and thrown over to the side, and it's still there, and maybe it's interacted with, but it's never fully addressed, or you get caught in it, but you try to escape it, and it just sits there as kind of either an elephant in the room. Yeah, but all of those things, that grief, that loss, that anticipation of what of the reality of the situation, of the loss of Maria Dell, of the pending loss of Maria Dell, is like is always hanging over in the corner, or is always weaving its way through each of the scenes in some form. And yeah, that's how I've always seen it.
Cool. We have another question from Pat. So thank you, Pat. Can you speak to the classic dramatic techniques used in this production? Not sure which specifically, but
classic dramatic techniques. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the challenge there is how do we determine what is classic, and how do we determine who's classic? Mm-hmm. So, while I think that actors training, because I'm also an artist educator, I think the fundamental things for me as an artist educator is that learning your instrument, which is voice, breath, movement, impulse. I feel those are universal acting techniques, no matter what community you come from, no matter what cultural background you have. Those things we are well supported in at Stratford, with our voice coach, Nancy Benjamin, with access to, in other seasons, more access to coaches. But we are well supported as actors with having mentors and guides to help us through all of that. But I would also say that in an Indigenous way of storytelling, going back to what Brefny was saying earlier, that my feeling is that ensemble work is inherent as a fundamental principle and technique in the way that we look at Indigenous storytelling. And that's why I really appreciate what Jess has also brought to the project, because I think she's woven in a more European / American, Canadian concept of classical, and yet also woven in so some of the fundamental and key ways that we look at Indigenous storytelling. I hope that answers the question. Sorry, it's a tough one.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add, Brefny?
No, I thought that was very beautifully put. Yeah.
Cool. So your production, has it been filmed yet?
No, not
No,
yet.
okay. So, sorry. But if you've had the experience of having your productions filmed in the past for at another theater, um how does having a live audience plus cameras maybe change what you're doing on stage, or maybe re reinforce like sticking to what you planned? What challenges maybe do they pose, or at least do you anticipate they will pose if you haven't done this before?
I'll very shortly pass it off to Janie because I've rarely ever had maybe small promotional videos, so like one little single camera,
Mhm.
or you know, in university archival footage, so like one little camera set up at the back. So I don't have a ton of experience with that. I'm excited. I was able to see the time that I got to see Midsummer Night's Dream this year. It was during their filming day, so at least getting an idea of like having that setup of all of these cameras, and then just watching the actors kind of um, play with this new setup, right? Because sometimes you have to walk right in front of the cameras because you got to go do the thing you got to go do. And that was really fun and interesting to watch. But yeah, it's still a big unknown for me. I don't know, Janie, if you have more experience with that.
I haven't much. I would say that even having an archival video of a production kind of throws me because I'm I there's always a little tiny part of me that's aware that there's a camera, and I struggle with trying to just remain and sit in my intention and my agenda, which is do the play that I rehearsed. And so it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a wonderful challenge for us all, because I've never done a multi-camera setup. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited about learning something new as an actor, and seeing if I can I just want to stay true to my performance, because I want myself anyway, I want whoever is watching the filmed version to have a similar experience to those who are sitting in the audience. So I'm gonna try to do that.
Awesome. um this is just like kind of a question. What is your favorite stage to perform on that you've had the opportunity to perform on?
Wow.
You have one? Or six?
I have a story I'll share. So
Excellent.
early on in my career, I was doing a tour of a Thompson Highway adapted a story called Annie and the Old One, which is a Navajo story, children's story. And we did a 6 month tour of this. And touring is it's it's crazy hard, but it's really good actors training. And we took the show to a high school in Sudbury, where the high school students, had a great program there, and the teacher was amazing. And so they developed a lighting plot, and we had this beautiful stage, and we came out of that production going, yeah, like that's real theater. Like that's where we should be, with the lights and everything, because we'd been doing a lot of school tours in high school gyms and stuff like that. And then we left that and we drove to a reserve where there was, at that time in the 80s, there was no community center, there was no big space to do the show, there was nothing. So they cleaned out what they used as the fire hall. And there was even a big grease spot in the middle that they covered in the sawdust. But every, almost every single person from the reserve came, and they bussed in all the elders, and it was packed. It was packed. The dogs showed up. Like it was crazy. It was crazy packed. And it was the best theater experience I've ever had,
Wow.
because everybody there was so appreciative of the fact that we had come. Some of them had never seen theater before, like, well, this kind of theater. We have theater. Our storytelling is theater. We've been doing theater for for in memorial. But this kind of experience, some of them was the first time, and it reminded me, it reminded all of us that it's not the space that you're in, it's the story that you're telling. And it's the importance of that storyteller audience relationship. And so I learned early on in my career to appreciate every single space that I was in, because it's not necessarily about the space. It's about, are you in that right relationship with your audience? And I'm glad that I learned that early.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's so special too. Yeah, it doesn't matter where it is as long as we're connecting in some way. That's really wonderful. Do you have any thoughts on that, Brefny?
Yeah. Um, this is a little different because it was about where I was. But the first thing that popped into my mind was doing a show at Caravan, and it was my first time in BC ever. And it was a wintertime show, outside wintertime show. And you've got the horse-drawn carriages that are like taking the audience out, and that are also taking us out to these beautiful, just like acres of land. And at the very beginning of that show, I sing a song, and then I hop on a wagon and I get taken out through this field. And there's just a turn that we make, because it was always the 4 p.m. show, and the light was still out, and it was just like this giant sheet of mountain being pulled out into this space, and then there was a stage kind of like out there facing the mountain, and being able to do the show, do that little part of the show, in that environment with those mountains, because I was born and raised in Toronto. I don't come from a land of mountains, and like the energy that those ancient beings have is so intense and so incredible. And it was just like getting to sing to the mountains. I was like, I am so happy, so grateful to be in this spot at this moment in time, even though the wet snow is like hitting my face, and even though all the other things like the horse farts or whatever, I was just like, no, I get to sing to the mountains, and that's just the best thing ever. So yeah, that's the first moment, the first memory, the first thing that pops into my mind was how incredible the beauty of it. It was just stunning.
And what cool experiences for both of you. Like, just very different than what I was anticipating with that question, and it's just so beautiful. Oh, that's so great. um okay. What do I want to ask you next? I have so many questions I just still want to ask. All right. Can you share any advice you might have for any young uh actors out there, or performers or artists out there, or specifically Indigenous artists out there who are interested in a career in theater, but maybe haven't taken that jump, or don't have maybe like supportive community around them to go into that field?
Want to start, Brefny?
Sure, I can start. Um, I always, I have um, such a love for the young artist, like the emerging artist. I think that's like the most special time in a life. I was gonna say, I was like, in a career, I was like, there'll be lots of special times, but there's something so wonderful about deciding that this is what I want to do, and this is what brings me joy. Um, and there's just so much energy and enthusiasm, and so much open space, because the the beginning of the learning is never ending, but the beginning of the learning is um, just starting to happen. And I've been very, very fortunate. I was really blessed with two parents that really did support me. So it's hard to say what advice I would have because the support of my family was really the thing that kind of like gave me the wind to say, oh, I can do this. It's gonna be okay. And my parents love to watch me create, and they love to come and see me work. So I think that was hugely important in my path to this moment right here. But I think, to be quite honest, like the importance of play, and I don't really know if this answers the question, but this is the path I'm going down right now. Whether or not someone continues on the path of like being a career artist, I think that learning how to hold play and improvisation and spontaneity and performance, not just for an audience but for your peers, is such a valuable thing that I would wish for anybody to have the experience, to have the opportunity to participate in that kind of play, especially as we get older. That's if it weren't for my training, at least a lot of my friends, like, they don't get that same kind of play, and I'm just so appreciative of the fact that that's what I get to do. So I don't think that really answers the question, but
well, you want people to be encouraged to be courageous and take chances and do these kinds of things. So I think it answers the question, absolutely. What about you, Jani?
I think our communities and the individuals in our communities are still in a very precarious place. We aren't that far away from the end of the residential school system. We're only a few generations away from our artistic practices being outlawed, being against the law, which is just mind-boggling to me still. Like, I'm like, what do you mean it's against the law? I just want to say that one more time. It's against the law to sing and dance. It's just mind-boggling to me still that was a part of our Canadian history. So we are not that far away still from the generational memory that we carry in our bodies about that being the difference between potentially being shot. I'm going to just be like truthful here.
Do it.
There was a time when if we were caught singing and dancing, we'd be thrown in jail, So there's a generational memory, there's a body memory, I think, that we're still struggling with in our communities, that we are finding our way back from. What I'm enthusiastic about and very excited about is our youth who are saying, okay, let's find a way past that. Let's find a way to re-engage, tell our stories in a multitude of mediums. Whether it's jigging, whether it's Métis jigging, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's a rap, whether it's theater, whether it's visual art, like, we are finding our way back there, but it's been a long road to get here. So I'm very hopeful with where the youth are reclaiming their place in the world as storytellers, reclaiming and using new mediums to do that, to reconnect with the importance of storytelling, telling our stories, telling history, telling personal stories, and finding a way to do that. Not everyone and not every community is in a completely healthy place with that relationship. So I do recognize that some Indigenous youth really struggle with the opportunity to find the support that's necessary to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think there's also several ways of looking at this. One, as Brefny was saying, a career in like a world's career. I believe that training is helpful, especially in theater, because then you have the toolkit to help yourself through the the ability to remain healthy and safe within some of the stories that you're telling, because you're carrying a lot of these stories that our writers are writing about are quite wide, and we need to have the skills to be able to um, remain healthy while telling these incredibly deep, sometimes traumatic stories. But there's also just as an important, there's an equal importance to being a leader in your community, on your reserve, or in your Métis community, or even in an urban environment where you're maybe you're a street performer, maybe you're just maybe not just a storyteller, maybe you're a storyteller, maybe you don't. There's many ways of looking at being an artist, and expressing yourself artistically. And I think there's just as much importance with someone working on a reserve uh, who is looking at finding ways to express themselves creatively as there is doing a show at Stratford. And that's the thing that makes me hopeful about the future, is that what I'm seeing is that a lot of our youth they're reclaiming that that ability and the necessity to do that, and that's what makes me excited, because we've still got work to do. And Canadian society has a lot of work to do to help and support those youth, to help reshift what we hold in our bodies still.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Jani. And I think that's a really beautiful place to end, in hopefulness and in hope. Thank you. So before I do fully close, I just want to thank both of you so much for sharing so candidly this morning with us. It was a real honor to get to see both of you in your faces, but also speak with you this morning. And thank you all at home who joined and shared your questions, and who are watching this maybe not on this Saturday, but at another time. And it's always a joy to connect with you in this format. So please join us next Saturday at 10 a.m. for another Meet the Festival, and that one will be with artists from Three Tall Women. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.